Greetings everyone, it's Kaz here, posing the question, could Bethesda's upcoming fall releases, i.e. Wolfenstein 2 and The Evil Within 2, completely expose and exploit Bethesda's review policy that they introduced late last year? So, what is Bethesda's review policy? Well, it's a policy that has been utilised on Bethesda published games for over a year now that involves no early review codes or copies being given to video game reviewers in order for them to be able to post a review either right on launch day, a complete review, or perhaps even prior to launch, as we continue to see with a lot of publishers in the industry. This means that there is no review available at the launch date or prior, meaning the day the game comes out, there are no official reviews, meaning the customer and the consumer has no means by which they can judge whether the game is actually objectively decent or not. This is done in order to boost pre-order numbers and also day one sales, so that if the game gets bad reviews, people that perhaps had the game pre-ordered or that were planning to pick it up on day one don't back out of their plan to do so because a review has already posted saying this game is not the greatest and you shouldn't pick it up. Because if these review copies are not sent out early, the gamer who has pre-ordered the game or is excited to pick it up on day one, they most likely have already purchased it before reviews have already been finalized. So if the game is actually bad, it doesn't matter because the gamer has already purchased it. Many of us saw it as a move that was designed simply to get as much money out of the consumer as possible, which as a company makes perfect sense for Bethesda to do. So in terms of the history of this review policy, Doom, that released last year, the 2016 reboot, was the first example that we've ever seen to utilize this policy, and it was actually before we even knew this policy was a thing, because Bethesda would go on to actually announce its existence and its future in the company later that year. But Doom did utilize it, because no review copies were given out before launch for websites and critics, which at the time was seen as incredibly suspicious, because past examples, and typically in the industry, that means that there's bad signs for the game. If the developer or publisher chooses to hold it back and not allow any review copies to go out, that is typically a bad sign for the game, because it shows that the publisher may know that the game isn't up to standard, so they choose to hold reviews so it will get the same amount of day one sales nonetheless. But Doom became a smash hit and was one of the best games of 2016 for many people, which was of course great news for Bethesda. So just a few months after that, they of course decided to announce this review policy, and that the way they handled Doom's review copies will be the case for all Bethesda published titles moving forward. And while it did seem like a bit of an anti-consumer move on Bethesda's part, none of us were really concerned about the quality of their games because we knew Doom turned out so well. But the first game to officially be a part of that review policy other than Doom was Dishonored 2 in the fall of last year, and it had horrible performance issues on the PC, which is something we would typically and normally associate with that kind of review policy being used with games. Bethesda was no doubt embarrassed about this, and it certainly gave them a bad look considering they just announced this policy. It was going to be a big part of their marketing moving forward, and now it has essentially backfired on them because the game launched with huge issues. This also highlighted a lot of negative repercussions of the policy itself. So fast forward to Prey's release earlier this year in May, and once again, it followed the review policy. There were no early review copies sent out, and the game once again had horrendous PC issues in regards to frame rate and game-breaking bugs. It was so bad, in fact, that IGN reviewer Dan Stapleton infamously gave the game a 4 out of 10 simply because he couldn't finish it due to a bug. So outside of Doom, the Bethesda published titles that have taken part in this policy have all had major issues upon release. Now, this certainly could be an internal problem at Arcane Studios, the developers of Dishonored and Prey. That could simply be an issue with them internally where they have issues porting stuff to the PC. So in that case, it could actually be simply a coincidence, but still a very badly timed one at that. Now, gamers are beginning to associate that review process and policy by Bethesda with games that are semi-broken upon release, like Prey and Dishonored 2, which is a reaction that no company wants from their fans in the slightest. So what if this happens with Bethesda's games releasing in the fall of this year, namely being Wolfenstein 2 and The Evil Within 2? 2? And if it does happen, how will that affect the company moving forward in terms of their marketing strategy? Because the fact of the matter is, if something does occur like that again, with at least one of those 2 games, the review policy would truly be perceived as a joke amongst gamers, even more so than it already is. Meaning Bethesda at that point, if those major issues were to pop up again in those 2 games releasing this year, Bethesda would simply have to drop this review policy. There's no chance in hell they could continue this, especially since they would be losing even more goodwill, which is something they certainly do not want, in particularly after the whole Creation Club disaster, where now everyone seems to see Bethesda as a huge greedy corporation. And for this to happen again, and for the review policy to stay around, their status in the eyes of gamers will only be diminished further. So it is certainly important, to say the least, that they get this right. And if I had to guess, I would actually say that they will get it right, and that these games will not be broken or will not have issues upon release. It would be incredibly bad luck if that were to happen again, especially with those kind of frame rates and bug related issues to that extent. Not to mention, I'm sure Bethesda is fully aware of this potential issue occurring, and I'm sure they are doing whatever they can and taking all the time they need to ensure that both these games work perfectly at launch across all platforms. So I think Evil Within 2 and Wolfenstein 2 will be spared of the unsatisfactory technical issues, but if they are not, it would probably spell the end for Bethesda's incredibly mediocre review policy. So as always, please leave your thoughts on this topic in the comment section down below. If you are new to the channel, be sure to check out some of my other content and subscribe if you like what you see. Thank you all very much for watching today's video. I'll see you all next time. Do take care and farewell.